Hello everyone, this is Eflex and welcome back to another A Producer's Approach video. In this video, we're going to be looking at Riot's song, Overkill. So if you haven't watched my videos in the past, I basically break down these videos into three separate sections. I have an intro backstory section, breakdown analysis section, and then lastly an outro section. So this song, Overkill by Riot, is, I would personally say, my favorite song from Riot. And when they initially came on to Monstercat, their first release, I forget the name at the moment, but it wasn't my favorite. But then I heard The Mob and then I heard AWA, and those two songs were completely different than what I heard in the dubstep or drumstep kind of world, where it was like a dubstep song, but it built like a whole story kind of throughout the whole song, which I thought was pretty unique. And from those two prior releases, Overkill is probably their best release after that, and I would say currently, because they released a couple songs like Jungle Fury after Overkill, but I would say Overkill is probably my favorite song. Blackwater is not too bad. It's up there too. Or AWA. I really do like AWA a lot, and The Mob is really good too. So I would say Overkill is probably my favorite, and you could see it's a lot of other people's favorite too because it has 17 million views. This just is the best combination of drum step and just building a story and use of samples and high energies. Everything about the song is really good, and there's a reason why this is probably one of the more iconic songs on Monstercat in the last 4 years. So there are songs that are a little more hit and miss, but this is definitely just one of those iconic songs. I would say throughout the Monstercat discography, even throughout the years from the beginning till now. So, anyways, this is Riot's song Overkill. Let's get into the breakdown.
Running full system diagnostics. Machine status fully operational. System online. All stations are now enabled. Target dog the resistance. Operation Overkill.
Okay, so in the beginning, you hear various different samples, and you hear that ARP start off right off the bat. That is a very unique sound to Riot. Not that ARPs are any different from other artists. It's just this particular ARP sound is a little bit different than like 7 Minutes Dead, as we just previously saw in Act 3. It's a little bit different in terms of sound, but kind of the same concept. Riot is probably the few artists that can pull off using like samples. I don't know if they're historic samples or just kind of general samples from like a sample pack or kind of like cyberpunkish type samples, but they're really good at utilizing these samples and incorporating them in their song to where they make sense and it's not just like a random added sample. And I like how in the beginning they have little machine sounds in the background. I don't know if you heard that, but it's like subtle machine sounds like something you'd hear from like a hydraulic system. You hear that in the background, which I thought was a pretty interesting sound to just start off and set the tone of what this song is going to be and kind of the mechanical, kind of cyberpunkish feel of the song. So overall, really good. I like the use of the sample so far. The ARP is really iconic, and let's keep going. Okay, so within this section, it just gives me chills hearing the sample Overkill over and over again. I don't know if that's a recorded sample from someone, but it's definitely hitting the tone of the vibe that they're giving off of this kind of like cyberpunkish kind of, uh, I don't know, neo robotic civilization. Um, The ARP in the beginning is lowered in volume. You do hear it playing, but it's not as prominent. You hear more of a faster pluck with a little bit less of attack that goes, and that's a little bit higher pitch. So that plays along with the chord progression for this section. And it has a lot of width. I don't know if there's a pad attached to that or that's the full sound playing along with the chord progression. So basically, there's kind of a setting of the scene with the overkill, and the use of the sample is really good, and just the use of the space with the kind of pluckish meteor chord and the arp on the bottom. Just the use of all those three sounds is really cohesive and works very well. So, anyways, let's keep going. Okay, so what you do hear in this section is the melody. There's another melody playing in the background a little bit from when I started this video again. There's a little melody playing on top, but what is starting to be introduced here is the percussion and also the acoustic guitars. And just from the two sounds, the kick drum and the electric guitar, those sound like actual recorded sounds. They don't sound like a synthetic sound made in a plugin. They sound like actual recorded electric guitars, which I really like a lot because I'm a huge fan of hard rock and alternative rock and classic rock. So whenever I hear a actual kind of live element of an electric guitar and some kind of element from rock music in an EDM song, it always makes me enjoy the song a little bit more than the standard traditional kind of progressive house song, as you would say. So the tone of the song is a lot heavier, so you could tell by that guitar it's already going to be kind of like a heavy metal kind of fusion with EDM. So anyways, those are the two sounds I noticed, and now is going to go into the more guitar breakdown section. So let's keep going.
Operation Overkill. Kill them all.
Okay, so within this section is kind of the break section before the build, and it's really a interesting section because they use the guitars as the, I want to say, mid to bass section playing the chord progression, and then they have vocal chops in there, um, just to kind of give some flow and variation, add little accents to those guitars playing the chord progression, which was the main focus. So I like how within the section that was there. And then the snares started to come in within the section to play a little bit faster to kind of build up into that build up section. And then you hear the sample Operation Overkill, and then now is going to go into the build up section. So now you're going to hear the guitar change a little bit and kind of build up into this section. But I do like the electric guitar paired with the vocal chops within this section. They pair really nicely. It's like a contrast of like really heavy kind of electric guitars and like almost angelic vocal chops. So a really nice pairing between the two sounds. So anyways, that was a really good section. We'll get into this build up section now. Okay, so basically, build up section, the guitar changes. You hear a lot of like pickups or shreddings or pitch bend or something kind of with that, like it could be a pitch bend of some sorts for that electric guitar as it's building up. You do hear the snare really build up, and then you do hear the vocal sample of Kill Them All kind of come in. And there is like some pauses when it does change for the electric guitar, when it like kind of changes pitch, goes doo. It's like a pause and like a variation between this build up section and what's going to come in the future. So it's kind of a nice break in the build up, even though it's really building the tension. Like you kind of hear it building the tension. I think there might have been a VFX. It might have been pretty subtle, but it sounds like maybe a white noise sweep or something on the bottom. I could have misheard that, but basically, it's a really good build up. It's definitely building up the tension, and it's not the same chord being played that was previously being played, kind of in the pre break section before this build up with the electric guitar. So I like the variation there and the switch up in terms of playing the root note or something along those lines. So, anyways, we're gonna have like a really cool off drop here, and I don't know, I might be like pumping my fist or head bumping. So, anyways, we'll get into this first drop. Okay, so that was the first part of the drop, and that was completely insane. You hear the off drop where it builds up, and then you hear the percussion. It says "bop bop 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 your head," and it's just so cool. I always go pretty crazy after hearing that and just kind of pumping my fist. I was trying to focus a little bit more because of making this video, but normally I'm just like pumping my fist in this section. But you do hear the sound design sounds really kind of like a traditional kind of drum step drop, which is pretty similar to dubstep because this drop is in halftime. You hear the kick and the snare. So the kick's on one, snare is like on three, and then the hi-hats in between. So it's kind of like in a halftime rhythm. So it feels a little bit slower than it actually is. There was a lot of call and response within the section. Like almost every sound had like a call and response to it. What I did like within some of the end sections is a concept I think you hear in trap music where they have like really big brass kind of go burn, burn, burn to like end the measure. And I think that's like a really creative use within a dubstep song or a drum step song, because that element of trap is what I like, is when they use kind of those heavy brass instruments in trap to kind of really kind of emphasize end of measures or just certain parts of the measure, which I thought was a really interesting concept to use within the song. So it kind of emphasizes the kind of aggressive tone of the song and the heaviness of this drop. And then I liked a lot of the vocal samples thrown in here and a lot of the effects thrown in here. There's kind of like some glitching within this section. There's a lot of vocal chops or vocal samples thrown in there before a lot of the heavier kind of wub sounds play. And then there is a nice calm response between the wubs and then something that plays along, like a synthetic sound that plays the lead and going along with the chord progression within the section. So overall, just an amazing section. And then this part where it kind of has the more melodic breakdown with the electric guitars, you have a lead guitar and then the chordal second guitar playing this chord progression. That's kind of the part I also really like in this song because it reminds me a lot of a rock song. So definitely really cool there and how they're taking all these elements and combining them together. So let's keep going. All right, so that section right there, even though the percussion is more electronic, that's probably the closest you're gonna get to a rock song in an EDM song. That is pretty much the antithesis of what a rock song would sound like here in an EDM song, because the electric guitars sound realistic, and I believe they are. They sound recorded. They don't sound like a synthetic electric guitar made in a plugin, because I know how to make an electric guitar in a plugin, and it sounds almost real, but you can tell it's not really real. But this sounds like a real live recorded electric guitar. So whatever distortion this guitar player used, or for the lead sound and the chord progression, like it's a really clean distortion, really clean mix overall. So props to them, because it's not easy to pull off, especially with a lot of distortion in an electric guitar and when recording, to get like a good kind of sound bit. So this definitely sounds like a live recorded electric guitar to me. But anyways, in this section ends the first drop, and then it goes back into the ARP that you hear in the very beginning. So we'll get into this break section. Okay, so you hear the ARP, and then you hear that for a little bit, and then you hear the sample saying something with the groove of the record, and then it goes into a kind of a more rock percussion. It sounds like a very soft kick, so it sounds almost like an acoustic kick drum is playing, and then you hear the hi hats playing as well with the snare, but it doesn't sound as punchy as in the drop. So the snare could also be an acoustic snare as well, and you hear some kind of like a screaming sample, like you would hear kind of like in heavy metal screamo music, and then you hear this guitar playing like dun 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 dun, dun. And then you also hear like an alternate lead in the background from the electric guitar, which is very interesting because I never really picked up on that alternate lead from that electric guitar as well. I normally just hear the chord progression and the guy screaming like wow dun 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 dun. So that's an interesting thing. And if anyone has listened to Slipknot's song Psychosocial, this song definitely, in this part of the song, reminds me of the song Psychosocial. Just the way Slipknot's guitars sound within that song sounds very similar to the guitars in this song. A lot heavier than, what would you say, like Linkin Park or AC/DC. This is definitely like a lot heavier than that. So overall, this section's really good, and it's going to go even more into like the electric guitar section. So let's keep going. Okay, so within the section, you hear the end of that kind of almost, I almost want to say like guitar solo or guitar change up within that break section. And then it pauses for a little bit, where you kind of hear the reverb and delay kind of fade out. And then it just picks up with the electric guitar lead again, and then the electric guitar playing a different chord progression. And then it goes kind of back to what you heard previously in the last break section, so the more traditional things. So it's almost like there was a guitar solo happening in the middle of the song, and then now it's getting back into the traditional structure of the song. So nice breath of air and gap there to kind of bring everything back into what it will become again. So anyways, the percussion is the same, and let's keep going. Okay, so that section is similar to that last kind of break section you hear in the beginning before the build up. And you do hear the vocal chops come back again within the section. And I also noticed a lot of different VFX this time, kind of thrown in the background. They're really subtle VFX. I don't know if they're like atmospheric VFX or kind of machine sounding VFX, but I did hear some sounds in the background, and that was an interesting aspect to hear because I never really noticed those before, but they do add to the overall atmosphere and feeling of how heavy the song is and kind of the cyberpunkish feel of the song, or apocalyptic feel, I guess you'd say. So definitely really cool there. A nice touch again with the vocal chops being kind of angelic versus the electric guitar on the chords, and playing that lead being a little heavier than the more angelic chords. So again, a nice pairing between all the sounds within this section. So let's get into this build up and let's keep going.
Kill them all.
Okay, so that was kind of the build up section. And what I noticed this time with the build up section is the kick plays along with the snare. The snare plays like pretty fast, and then the kick is playing as well. And then you kind of have a break in the snare, and then it goes back into like building up again. So this build up to me, like both build ups actually within the song, feel very similar to what a rock song, in terms of like the build up into their chorus sections, what they would sound like. So this is probably, I would say, the best representation of how a rock song would build up, because they would play some toms like they did previously before the build up, play some toms and then go into playing the acoustic kick while playing the snare, and then like play it really fast and then like alternate with the kick, and then like have it kind of alternate a little bit and then build up from there, and then eventually reaching the climax and then hitting into the chorus. So this is probably the best representation I've heard from an EDM song, like closely relating building up to a chorus section. So definitely really cool to point that out. And the electric guitar seemed to be playing like within the same kind of way as it was in the previous build up section. So, anyways, the drop going into the second drop, it's pretty similar. Leading into it, it has kind of like an off drop with some percussion. I think it goes a little bit longer because there is a VFX thrown in there, and the vocal sample like kind of winds up to really build it even more, kind of symbolizing it's the second and last drop of this song. So let's get into it. Okay, so that's the second drop, and you could tell it built up way longer, with them saying "somebody scream," and then the snare comes in with that high pitched sound, kind of winding sound until it drops. Then it goes into a 4/4 rhythm, so you really kind of start going with the 4/4 rhythm, just kind of boom, 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 high energy. And then halfway through, the percussion switches back into the halftime rhythm. And I would say this drop is a little bit shorter. Actually, I think it is not a little bit. It's a lot shorter than the first drop because it doesn't have that melodic section in this second part of the drop with the electric guitars. But what I did notice within this second drop was there was like a cheering noise when it's going into the 4/4 rhythm, like ho ho ho. That's something you hear either in trap or dubstep music, so that's really cool. Um, Pairs really nicely with all the chaos of the kicks and percussion going on and the wubs going on as well. Huge calm response between that sound and the wubs. There was that trumpet or brass again that's playing at the end of the measure, and then you hear some different vocal samples, like wow, like some like metal guy screaming, sounds like to me, or something like that. And then it goes back into what you previously heard in terms of like the calm response when it goes into the halftime rhythm from what you heard in the previous drop, when it was a little more sound design esque. So overall, just a really good drop. Like you really could just fist bump within the section, and there wasn't as much emphasis on the electric guitar, I believe, in this second drop. So I think that's why within this, in the break section, the second one, they kind of emphasize like kind of the guitar solo, because it wasn't the guitar, or the electric guitar wasn't as included within the section. So um just to clarify what drum step is, usually drum step, like in the first or second drop, it's a halftime rhythm, and then in the like first or second drop, it goes into a 4/4 rhythm. So there's a switch up basically. The pace in terms of tempo is usually like the same or around the same tempo as drum and bass, but drum and bass has that double time rhythm. Drum step has the half time and maybe like a double time rhythm, or a 4/4 rhythm. So there is a switch up basically, but it's pretty similar in terms of like tempo to drum and bass. So just want to clarify that for anyone that doesn't know what drum and bass is. But anyways, we'll listen to the outro of the song and we'll talk more about the song after that.
Take this mild drug and you will have a nice sleep without any nightmares. You're among friends here. You must trust us. You will sleep now. A long sleep.
Okay, so the outro plays something like you would hear from like the 80s. It's like a sample, I guess, or something, I guess, from like the game Fallout. It sounds something like kind of post-apocalyptic like. And it plays along, and there's like a pad sound playing along with it. You hear like a piano. I think that's from the actual sample. And then after that, you hear this kind of ringing, kind of downlifting sound to outro the song. So this is Riot's song Overkill. I don't know what else I could say about this song. This is probably one of the heaviest songs on Monstercat. The inclusion of the electric guitars to me is kind of what makes this song. Like I really do like the hard drops, and the switch ups of it being drum step, but the overall tone just from the beginning is really great, and the electric guitars and the kind of acoustic elements in terms of percussion kind of sold me on the song, because the guitar kind of solo section, the second break, and just all those sections where the electric guitar is included along with the lead and the chord electric guitar just kind of solidifies the song as being really good. And just the structure and pacing of the song overall is just amazing. It paints this picture of like a post-apocalyptic kind of cyberpunkish feel for the song, and like, you know, the apocalypse is coming, and it sounds like you're gonna have to, you know, go into battle and like fight for survival against like a machine king or something. I don't even know, painted by the picture in the background. So overall, the song is just amazing. The sound design by Riot is just top notch. Clarity in the mix is just really top notch too, with how they combine a lot of different samples in with different guitar samples, sounds, and different sound design sounds from them. So Riot is like the only artist, as I mentioned earlier, that really combines those almost like post-apocalyptic, or kind of, I don't want to say like historic samples into their music, and they make sense. Sometimes artists throw them in there and it doesn't always make sense. It's kind of like, why did you throw that in there? You could have just left an instrumental. But Riot, they just do it really well. And I would say this is probably why Overkill is probably their best song on Monstercat, and their most iconic, and why it's become an iconic song on Monstercat itself. This is definitely up there with some of the great songs like Flight and Surface. So overall, I hope you like this video. Like, comment, subscribe. Definitely listen to Riot's other music. I think the song is part of like a, I think albums called Dogma the Resistance, I think. So that album, I purchased it right when the album came out. It's such a solid album. And I don't normally buy dubstep kind of albums, but this was definitely one of the few that I thought was different because it told a story from start to finish. Like it's a whole story, which I thought was pretty ingenious, setting like a story and tone for this whole album. So, anyways, hope you guys like this video. I'll see you guys in the next A Producers Approach video. Have a good one, everyone. Peace.